We're now joined by Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, who's a scholar of international relations, specializing in security issues in the Horn of Africa region, and also Futho Hoohlo, who's an electrical power engineer and former chief executive of the Water and Sewerage Company in Lesotho. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right, maybe let me start with you, Mr. Ali, and let's talk a little bit about the Grand Renaissance Dam, because it is one that is a great story for Ethiopia and the many that haven't had electricity, but it has come at a cost in terms of perhaps politics and neighbours.
Yes, indeed. The Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia is a project that many Ethiopians identify with. The Prime Minister there, Abiy Ahmed, saying it's a national project, it is going to plug a significant or address significant power deficit that hampers Ethiopia's development. It is always experiencing shortages of electricity. But at the same time, the project itself is seen by many, especially in the Sudan and Egypt, as a project that is going to hamper, reduce critical resource lifeline really for Egypt there, waters from the Blue Nile.
All right, and a lot of this is historical though, isn't it? Because back in the day when Egypt was busy signing these agreements on how the Nile should be shared and its waters owned, Ethiopia wasn't really at the table, and yet they're the main source of the Nile's richness.
Yeah, that's true. There is the historical rights that Egypt and Sudan claim on the waters of River Nile, the treaties of 1929 and 1959 that gave Egypt and Sudan most of the waters that come from River Nile. And Ethiopia has been saying that it was not represented at the signing of those treaties and therefore is not party to those treaties. When you look carefully, both have very good points as to argue out their cases. However, the United Nations Security Council, the United Nations itself, and the African Union has urged the countries, particularly the three countries, Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt, to come together to agree on a legally binding agreement that is going to ensure that no country is adversely affected by the usage of the River Nile waters or damming of the River Nile waters.
All right, so fast forward to the present day and some of the thorny issues about the rate at which this dam is filled and also what happens during droughts.
The biggest challenge is really around when there is drought, particularly on the Ethiopian islands, when there is no rain, there is less water. What happens to the dam that requires constant filling for it to generate the electricity output that it should be generating or earmarked? And so when you look at the dam itself, it's going to prevent not just water that reaches Egypt, but it's also going to disrupt.
All right, Dr. Mustafa Ali, are you still there?
Produce.
Ah, there we go. We had
Yes,
lost you for
I'm here.
we had lost you for a few moments. So if you could perhaps just start a little bit back.
Okay, yeah, I was talking about the the waters that will be dumped at the river itself. That automatically means that there will be less water reaching Egypt, and that's why it's very important for Egypt and Ethiopia, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia to agree bilaterally and trilaterally on the amount of water that should be dammed or the filling up of the dam itself so that to allow enough waters to reach Egypt. And it's not just only water. It is also the sediments that are carried by the water during flooding months when there is heavy rainfall in the Ethiopian islands that the Egyptian farmers depend on for the agriculture and the planting season in Egypt. So it is not just water, it is also the sediment. More importantly, it is the amount of water. I believe that Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia can agree based on the advice from the African Union and the United Nations.
We're talking about Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, but in real terms, there are 11 countries along the Nile, 280 million people depending on its waters. How come they're not in the conversation as well, the other 8 countries?
So in this case, it is the Blue Nile. Blue Nile supplies 80%, more than 80% of the waters that reaches Egypt. And that is why this latest disagreements and challenges is between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. The River Nile is if you look at the River Nile, it has the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The Blue Nile starts from the Ethiopian islands, and that is what is feeding. It's where the Grand Renaissance Dam has been constructed. The White Nile, on the other hand, is the one that comes down South Sudan, Uganda, and tributaries from Kenya, Rwanda, DR Congo, Tanzania feeds into Lake Victoria and onwards onto White Nile and River Nile proper. The the Blue Nile and the White Nile joins right in Khartoum, the capital city of Sudan.
All right, okay. I mean, this is a significant development, and let's see if we can be joined now by Mr. Futho Hoohlo, who's an electrical power engineer and former chief executive of the Water and Sewerage Company in Lesotho. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome. All right, I'm not hearing you, but I'm going to try again. Can you press unmute on your device? Is it on unmute? All right, okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Fantastic. So when this dam is finally complete, I mean, this is going to be the biggest source of hydroelectric power on the continent. That's quite an amazing feat, isn't it? Just from an engineering perspective.
It is indeed. What we need to understand is that Africa has a potential in terms of generating its own power in terms of renewable energy. We, as a country in Lesotho, for example, we have the Lesotho Highlands Water Project that we did indeed have the Muela hydropower station that we generated hydropower from. So the issue around hydro generation, it is very important for the continent and for the countries in Africa to be self-sufficient in terms of generation of power. So I I congratulate the country of Ethiopia for having commissioned the hydropower station that they have. And it brings a lot of potential for the continent. We have capacity in Lesotho around 450 megawatts that we can generate from hydropower. We have in the DRC the Inga and Great Inga projects, which we need to really have full potential and generation and even import or export energy to Europe. I remember when I was at university, there were some of the projects that we did as final year students, which involved undersea cables that talked to high voltage direct current transmission. So this is a great feat that we have done as Africa, and we need to do more in terms of realizing the potential that Africa has in terms of hydro. I don't know if you want me to explore more, Peter, in terms of what this continent can do in terms of hydropower generation.
All right. In fact, let's explore that a little bit in terms of cost to produce. We're busy grappling with energy mixes at this time. Relatively speaking, is the hydro route cost effective? Is it something that can work for the continent?
It is indeed, because when you go to the Scandinavian countries, for example, a river source can produce quite a lot of energy in terms of cascading your hydropower from the high elevation that you have, and have all these mini hydropower stations within a river source that can augment the energy that you feed into your grid. So it is cost effective. What we need to do is be more resourceful in terms of exploring our terrain. For example, like you're saying, as I am from Lesotho, it is a highly mountainous country with a lot of water, and we can harness that in terms of our river systems that we have. So it is cost effective that we do explore this avenue in terms of having energy that we feed into the grid.
All right, so let me come back to you, Dr. Ali. We're hearing there from Mr. Hoohlo that Africa should fully develop its potential in the hydro energy production. If we have seen the political drama play out within Sudan, Egypt and Ethiopia, I would imagine we have potential in other parts of the continent if these things are not agreed properly beforehand.
Yeah, true. The previous speaker, Futho, has mentioned about the huge potential that Africa has in the production of electricity, renewable energy. DR Congo alone can really power Africa and even have surplus for exports. And it's very important that Africa develop from its natural resources, electricity, clean energy that is going to power Africa, especially now that there is clamor for a green energy. The challenge always has been where you have rivers that transcend beyond one country, where if you dam the river in one, then it affects the downstream countries. So the upstream countries might want to dam a river, and this is the case for Ethiopia, and then in Sudan and even lower riparian country like Egypt is going to suffer if the flow of the river is going to be undermined by the damming. The damming is okay, and I think we should encourage that so that we produce clean energy. So in such a situation, logic demands that there is candid talks between the countries, the upstream countries, and the downstream countries to agree on the flow of the water, so that nobody is affected adversely by any kind of development. Egypt is a desert country, and they need that water. But also Egypt has very developed agricultural sector, water resources and resourcing, irrigation. And so through exchange of technology, we can have African countries becoming self-sufficient, but they will need to agree on how to use these resources optimally.
All right, and perhaps a final question to you, Mr. Hoohlo. How much potential is there? How much of the continent's energy needs might we be able to meet if we fully develop our hydroelectric potential?
Peter, like I said, there is potential enough that we can feed even Europe.
Wow.
The Inga, I'll talk about DRC again. The Democratic Republic of Congo, through the Great Lakes region, has potential to have Inga 1, Inga 2, and Grand Inga. That can feed the whole continent and even export to Europe. So what we need to do as a continent is to have political stability. That is very important, to have political stability, that we are able to harness all these resources that we have. And Africa can benefit from the renewable energy that we generate from hydro. We have potential here in Lesotho. We have potential in quite a number of countries that we can be able to develop our power production, that it feeds the whole continent. So as a continent, we need to get our act together in terms of political stability, so that we realize the potential that this continent can do in terms of hydro. Thanks, Peter.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you so much indeed for joining us. These are historic times, even if sometimes politically challenging. But I think the moral of the story here is that if we can find our way through the politics, we have huge potential to change this continent. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and your insights greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Great.